Hey, Mike Carpenter here. Welcome back to For the Meeple, by the Meeple. Today we're going to be taking a look at Imhotep. Imhotep was a huge hit at Origins 2016 this year because of its Spiel des Jahres nomination. But was it worthy of the buzz? Let's take a look. Imhotep's main board is made up of 5 sites: the market, the burial chamber, the obelisk, the pyramids, and the temple. 4 of these sites will play host to a project that players will be working on throughout the game. The market will allow players to obtain cards that either affect the end of game scoring or allow players special actions throughout the game. At the beginning of the game, each player is going to receive a sled in their color. They will also receive a number of starting stones according to their place in the turn order. The first player will get 2 stones to start the game, and then each player to the left will receive 1 more stone than the last. There are also 8 ships in the game. These ships have 1 to 4 squares on them, representing how many stones can be placed on the ship. They also have an icon at the front of the ship that tells you how many stones have to be on the ship before it can be sent to any of the locations. At the beginning of each round, players are going to flip one of these round cards, and these cards will tell you which 4 ships to use in this round. So in this case, we have 2 ships with 3 squares and 2 ships with 2 squares. A player may take 1 of 4 actions on their turn. The first available action is to take up to 3 stones of their color from the quarry and place it on their sled. If a player only has 1 or 2 available spaces, the player can never exceed 5 stones. The second available action is to take 1 of the stones of their color and place it on any of the ships. The player does not have to place the stone at the front of the ship because as you send these ships to the locations, the order of the stones will affect players' scores at each location. The third available action is to actually send 1 of the ships to any of the locations. The fourth available action is to play 1 of the blue market cards that a player has obtained earlier in the game. These cards typically allow you to do some type of special move or a combination of actions. If any player ever sends any of the ships to the market, players will look at the order of the stones on the ship and then remove them from front to back. As the stones are removed, they are placed in the quarry, and the owner of the first stone will take 1 of the 4 available cards. The second will then take 1 of the remaining, and if there's a third, they will take 1 of the remaining 2 cards. If players ever send a ship to the burial chamber, players are going to look at the order of the stones and then place them from top of the column down, like this. Once that column is full and ships continue to come to the burial chamber, you will work your way down each column. The burial chamber you score points for the burial chamber at the end of the game. You score these points based on how many stones you have adjacent to one another. So in this case, the gray player has 4 adjacent stones. They would look at the chart, and that would be worth 10 points. The brown player has 2. They would score 3 points. If a ship has ever sailed to the obelisk, the order of the stones does not matter. The players are simply going to take stones from the ship and place it on the matching color of their stones. As the game goes, players will be stacking upward in their own obelisk. The player at the end of the game that has the highest obelisk will score the most points, and then second, third, and fourth. These points are different for the number of players in the game. Players will also score this at the end of the game. If a ship is ever sent to the pyramids, players will again look at the order of the stones on the ship and much like the burial chamber, place them from the top left down each column. If you can see, there are different points for each location of the bottom layer of the pyramid. Those points are going to be scored immediately on the scoring track as players send their stones to the ship. Once the bottom layer of the pyramid is finished, players will then place 4 more stones in the second layer. They will score points for these stones according to this chart here. Finally, a top stone is placed on the pyramid to finish the pyramid, and it is worth 4 points. As the game continues, if any extra stones are sent to the ship, they will accumulate to the right of the board, and players will receive 1 point per stone of their color at the end of the game. If players ever send a ship to the temple, they are going to again look at the order of the stones on the ship and place from left to right in these 5 spaces. If in a 2-player game, you would only use 4 of the spaces. As the game continues, you can build a second, third, fourth layer of the temple. To score points for the temple, you need to take an aerial perspective of the stones on the temple, and whatever stones you can see are worth 1 point each. So in this case, black would score 2 points, gray would score 2 points, and then brown would score 1 point. The temple is scored at the end of each round, rather than only at the end of the game. This is going to continue until all 4 ships are sent each round. Once all 4 have been sent, the round ends. Players are going to then flip over the next round card, and that will tell them which 4 ships are going to be used in the next round. They will then put out 4 new cards in the marketplace, and then play will continue, starting with the player on the left of the player who sent the last ship to the ports. Once 7 rounds have ended, players are going to check their green and purple market cards to see if to do their end of game scoring. They are then going to check the burial chamber. They'll then check the obelisk, and then in case there are any extra pieces left at the pyramid, they'll count those and include them in their score, and then the player with the highest score at the end of the game is the winner. In my opinion, Imhotep's attention was well deserved. While the game seems simple because of its 3-dimensional aspects and the toy-like vibe it gives off, the level of player interaction and the depth of the strategy in this game make it far better than most of the games in the lightweight category. Almost to the point where it creeps out of the lightweight and moves into a medium weight feel. That's because the 3 of the 4 projects in the game require a very finely tuned strategy in terms of not only how to get the stones in the right place on a boat, but to get those boats sent to the right location. The burial chamber gets a lot of looks because it's obviously going to give you a lot of points if you're able to get a lot of stones adjacent to one another. And the pyramid seems to be attractive because it will award you points very quickly, and people like to see their stone move up along the scoring track very quickly. The temple, though, is is probably the most overlooked area because it scores very small amounts of points. But if you can get a steady 2 or 3 points per round in this game, it's going to be a big factor by the end of the game. The obelisks seem to be almost a place to dump stones, and very few people emphasize winning that area. But if you look at the difference between first and last and the points awarded for the tallest versus the shortest obelisk, it can be a tipping point when you consider all points together at the end of the game. If you're close with someone and yet you've won the obelisk and the other person has finished last at the obelisk, you're going to score several more points than the other player. The fact that you have so much control on other players' strategy is what makes this game just a tad bit mean, almost too mean for some players, because really you can pretty much dictate what other people are going to be doing or working on. But if you're able to adapt and go with the flow, and some people take that approach where they're just trying to get an abundance of stones on the ships, and then people will dictate where they go. But the strategy works out well for them because they simply do well at most of the projects. There's a lot going on here. It's a very quick game. It's only 40 minutes or so, but during that 40 minutes you get a lot out of the game. You make a ton of good decisions, meaningful decisions, not always good decisions, but they are the kind of decisions that as I'm playing I feel like my moves influence not only myself but everyone else at the table. It's very difficult to keep your intentions secret, but at the same time, neither can the other player. So you have to be able to push one way with your moves and then push another way on some of the opponents to make sure that they are not able to execute what they're trying to do either. At the end of the day, though, everybody's going to get stones to projects. It's just a matter of how you get that flow of the stones moving across in your favor. If you simply like to accumulate a lot of the market cards, that's another good way to approach the game, because a lot of the purple and green cards will help end of game scoring in your favor. There are so many choices in this game for its weight that it is definitely enjoyable. Like I said at the beginning of this of my final thoughts, it has a three-dimensional aspect which makes kids obviously enjoy it. It's a familiar theme that almost everyone has probably studied or seen something about over the years. So it's very easy to relate to. It looks as though you are working in that theme. So it's just an enjoyable game. I have no real complaints with this game. The components are great. The cubes are so much larger than the standard cube you would find in many of the games, that they appear much nicer in this game than the smaller cubes that most people are used to. No component problems in this game whatsoever, and truthfully, it is becoming one of my favorite lightweight games that I play with my family on a regular basis. So, if you're interested in Imhotep, I would have to say it is definitely something to check out, and probably give it a try, and then probably buy it at some point too. Thanks for watching For the Meeple, by the Meeple, and I'll see you again next time.